History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
From the church to the streets, and even in the suites, and all around the world. I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
Good afternoon. I'm super excited to be back for season 2 of Fannie Lou's Classroom. Listen, we want to thank everybody who supported us in season 1, and hopefully we received some new viewers in our downtime. You were able to go back and watch our previous episodes and binge watch season 1. So listen, make sure you tell your friends, your family, your colleagues about Fannie Lou's Classroom. Like us on Instagram and on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure you hit the notification bell so you can be alerted when we go live right here at Fannie Lou's Classroom. And listen, from last season to this season, we now want to make sure you can support us not only by watching, liking, and sharing our videos, but now you have the opportunity to financially support us so we can do more with Fannie Lou's Classroom. We now have our Fannie Lou Classroom t-shirt that's available for purchase. You can purchase today by simply going to friendshipwest.org/justice. That's our justice page. Scroll down, you will see a link for you to order your t-shirt. So we appreciate your support. That'll help us do some things around here to bring you more rich content and some amazing people so that we can have this dynamic learning community so we all can learn together how faith, politics, and theology intersects and impacts our lives every single day. Now, listen, I have to absolutely shout out the FLC team. Listen, we have Brooke Mosley and Roche Moore, who are our engineers on the show, who held it down in season 1 and hold it down in season 2. So we're going to give them a big round of applause. So Brooke, as always, is sitting over there laid back, real calm and cool in the cut, but she has been amazing. Of course, we have Shanika and Cheryl, who are part of our team, who really carry a lot of the weight to make sure we bring you an excellent show that is produced. And so Candace Lowe, as you know, was our manager of our show. She has moved on to some other things in life, so we want to make sure we shout her out and appreciate all she did to get the show going. She was instrumental in Fannie Lou Classroom being launched and being the success that it is. So we also want to make sure we speak her name in this space, though she has moved on to do some other things. And of course, we have to remember to shout out our pastor, the Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes III, who is a justice seeker and a truth teller. And so certainly in the legacy of Fannie Lou Hamer, and certainly in the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., we continue to lift up those issues that impact us every day. And so Fannie Lou's Classroom is a way for us to talk about those issues, to get us all engaged in action, advocacy, and activism. And so we have these conversations around so many topics that we hope that we can just have conversation around to get you motivated, to get you thinking about how you find your place in the world to do what God has called and equipped you to do. And so I'm super, super duper excited about today's show. I have 2 brilliant people, but they're just not brilliant by way of classroom. They can also break it down and make it accessible to everyday people. So I'm excited for our conversation on today. So before I do that, I want to get into what we always start off with, is Fannie Lou's Classroom. We do like a little 2 or 3 minute piece where we want to kind of talk about things, or talk about an issue or historical fact or something that really speaks to what Fannie Lou, if she were alive today, would give a voice to and have a conversation about. So let's step into the classroom for just a few minutes.
In Fannie Lou's class.
Now don't you dare be late. We need retention, not detention.
So today what I want to highlight, which will kind of lead us into our conversation today, I want to shout out Governor Wes Moore, who became the first elected Black governor for the state of Maryland, becoming only the 3rd Black person to be elected governor. Really, 5 have served as governor, but only 3 have been elected as governors. So we had Governor Douglas Wilder, who was elected, I believe, in 1990 to the state of Virginia. And then we had Deval Patrick, who was the governor of Massachusetts, was elected in 2007. And then, of course, in the contemporary sense, we had David Elizabeth Patterson, who finished out Elliot Spitzer's term as governor when he had to step down. And so before that, when we had a black governor who served out someone else's term, was in the state of Louisiana. So we had Oscar Dunn, who he was the first elected lieutenant governor in the country, and he served in that office in Louisiana before becoming acting governor because the current governor died of an injury. Then we had PBS Pinchback, who was serving as the president of the state's Senate in Louisiana, and then eventually he assumed the office to serve out the remaining term as governor when the previous governor had been removed because he was impeached. Sounds familiar. So, this is a historical moment, but it always leads me to think about the fact that we still haven't had a black female governor, though we should have had one in 2018 when Stacey Abrams ran for governor. So we still have, with all these so-called advancements and movements that we've made, the fact that we've only had 3 elected black folks throughout the United States in our history lends us to believe that we still have quite a bit of work to do to organize around our power to do what we do to get folks in office who can really set an agenda that really speaks to our total well-being. So I just want to think about that today in that regard as we lift up West Moore as certainly something to be celebrated, but also showing that we still have some ways to go and by way of who we put in office and how we as people move, organize, and mobilize to get certain folks in office where we thereby can lay forth our agenda and things that we need, like a Fannie Lou who did just that, right? She was very clear about what it meant to survive and to thrive, not just barely get by, but what is needed. And she was actively engaged in making that happen when she died prematurely because of lack of access to health care and just as a black woman not being honored in the healthcare system. So we want to just lift that up on today. So let's hold that with us even as we go through our conversation with our 2 amazing guests that we have on the show today. So let me jump into who we have today. Let me start with Reverend Edwin Robinson. He is not a stranger to Friendship West. If you've been around, if you were at the teach-in last Saturday, you really heard how amazing he was by way of his facilitation of a workshop. We did it at MLK teach-in. He is also a member of Friendship West Baptist Church. And so he is an amazing, amazing young brother that I work with in this struggle. And it has been a joy to get to learn, to know more about Edwin as we're working more closely together. And boy, it's been a joy. And so I really love, really working with Edwin. So I'm super excited to have him back. He was on our show in season 1 and really did an amazing job as we tackled the issue of housing in Dallas, or lack thereof, of access to affordable housing in Dallas. So if you watch that, he's brilliant. He can break down what we have to do as people, not dependent on elected officials or a system to do for us, what we need to organize around and do for ourselves and move that system and change that system. So Reverend Edwin Robinson is a community organizer and political consultant with a background in organizing Black people and people of faith to develop life-giving policies, elect progressive leaders, and build the civic and revolutionary power of ordinary people like himself. Edwin believes through the leadership of those who have been made to be the least of these, we can dismantle the systems of oppression that continue to create the poor and powerless among us. So you can read more about Reverend Robinson if you go to our YouTube channel and see the extended bio. You can catch more about all he has to offer and all his pedigree, if we want to say that. And then we have, really not a stranger to many of you who may be watching who are members of Friendship West and the whole Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, we have the Dr. Brenda Wall. Dr. Wall has served as a leader in the Dallas-Fort Worth mental health community for more than 3 decades. Throughout her career, she has maintained expertise in psychotherapy and counseling, in higher education, and social justice. Her diverse experience includes work in the clinical psychology, which involves broad exposure to psychotherapy and assessment, as well as an employment as department chair and professor of psychology, college vice president, I didn't know that, college vice president, and host of both radio and television. She is an author who addresses diverse issues of currency in American society. Dr. Wall, a former Fulbright Scholar, currently serves as the Grant Director of Reclaiming Mental Health at Friendship West Baptist Church here in Dallas, Texas, and counselor at the Lovett School in Atlanta, Georgia. She is often consulted on issues of social equity and justice. This permits her to provide a range of creative interventions which challenge, inspire, heal, and ultimately contribute to a fairer and more stable society. And you can certainly, again, see more of Dr. Wall's bio and all of her pedigree and educational advancements and achievements on our YouTube channel. So please make sure you check out the remainder of those bios on that YouTube channel. And very quickly, let me do this. I usually don't do this, but I want to do this in this moment. Reverend Robinson and Dr. Wall, tell the people how they may be able to begin to follow you, the work that you're doing, how to contact you. Because once we jump into this conversation, I want to keep it flowing. So let the people know how they can reach you and find you.
Well, they can contact me at Friendship West, Brenda Wall, Friendship West. Still got my email there, have my phone number there, and I think that's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
All right, so is that bwall@friendshipwest.org?
It sure is.
Yes, ma'am.
They can contact me. I'm on not all the social medias anymore. I forgot. You call me a young man, but I'm getting older.
Younger than
I'm
me.
Not, yeah, I'm not on all of them anymore. But on Instagram at Edwin, the number 4 the humans. So Edwin for the humans on Instagram and Twitter. And then on Facebook, just look up Edwin Robinson. You'll find me. I'm not hard to find. And then also, if you want to check out some of the work that I'm doing in organizations I'm working with, you can go to dallasblackclergy.org, and you can also go to faithinTexas.org and follow some of the work that we're up to.
Yes. See, that's why I wanted y'all to shout that out. People need to be able to find you. After they hear you, they're going to know, well, where can I find more of this information and connect with these folks? So very good, very good. So let me say this, and of course, as everybody knows, the Fannie Lou's Classroom, we're very informal here. We laugh, we talk, we joke, and just have a good time while we try to talk about very serious issues that we need to address as a people, right? So here at Friendship West, we have said that 2023 is the year of excellence. That's our overall thematic thrust. And for our trimester, we're saying we want to deal with personal excellence. So, of course, for many people, I don't do this, but many people do New Year's resolutions, like a better me, new me, et cetera, right? So I thought maybe today, it's still early in the year, I wanted to start this conversation off and the season off with, let's really talk about that. Like, let's talk about this word power is often kind of tossed around, right? Like we have to tap into our power to be this and to be that. And then, so Reverend Robinson, on your end, I know you deal a lot with breaking down the various forms of power we use to organize around, right? So I want to have this conversation with you and Dr. Wall. Like, how do we deal with the internal that we didn't see that expressed on the outward, right, in order to have people in position and in a good place to do this work? Because sometimes, I don't know, me and you've experienced this, we're holding an organizing meeting and someone will stand up and talk about an issue, like some trauma they're facing in the moment. And, you know, we're trying to organize, but people are sitting back. It's the same thing with church, too, right? People are sitting back bringing things with them and carrying things with them. And so I thought we'd just kind of jump in and have a conversation about, let's just unpack that and talk about it. And Dr. Wall, I'm going to start with you. So just talk to us about what is it when we tell people to, you know, you have the power, you need to tap into your power within. When people say that, what are we really saying, and why is it important to understand that you have power and how to access that power?
First of all, thank you. I love being here. I love being here with Reverend Robinson. This is awesome. Fannie Lou, thank you for your great spirit that is with us. I used to say on my radio show, personal empowerment parallels political empowerment. So when we talk about power, I think especially in the African-American community, we have been taught to disconnect from the power that we have. We've been taught to see ourselves as victims. We've been taught to see ourselves as pawns in someone else's game of power. And what we have seen in the last couple of generations is that, wait a minute, we do have agency. We can make a difference. Fannie Lou did make a difference. Reverend Robinson makes a difference. You are. So I think part of what becomes important is to look at what are the barriers on the personal level that continue to cause women, men, and even our children to look at themselves in terms of disempowerment, in terms of inadequacy, in terms of being very self-critical, that we look at ourselves in terms of what we cannot do, and that makes it harder for us to move beyond the survival level. Mm-hmm. Now, we're great at surviving. Mm-hmm. We are the survivors. But how do we move forward? You got to recognize and you got to give yourself permission to operate out of that power that we have.
So I like that. So break that down a little bit more for us, for people who may be listening and may want to share this. When you say we have to deal with some of the personal barriers that we have, what are just some things you would tell someone to do if they are listening? They may be kind of struggling with it. They hear and feel exactly what you're saying, so they're thinking, well, how do I do that? Well, like, what's the first thing I should do? Do I read a book? Do I just pray about it? Like, what are some practical things folks can do to really break down, well, if you want to even list some barriers that we have, and then how we might go about dealing with those on a personal level?
Reading the book is good. Praying about it is good. But I think the first step is to be willing to identify, this happened to me. There's nothing wrong with the fact that, I grew up, I didn't have enough to eat when I was a little girl. I grew up, I had a father who was away. He was incarcerated unfairly, but he was away. That we have to identify those issues that really cause us to struggle with personal pain. And you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do it by yourself. But you do need to identify that place where you need to have more freedom internally. And as you allow yourself to cry through it, to laugh through it, to get out on the other side, you begin to see that there is the gift that has been given you by God that will carry you to a place where you can share with others. So first thing is to identify, what is it? I know you don't want to talk about that rape. I know you don't want to talk about that poverty. I know you don't want to talk about how you've been faking it and people don't even know what's really going on with you. But when you can face that in yourself, it opens up tremendous possibility to meet with God, to meet with community, and to meet with your destiny.
Thank you, Dr. Wall. Robinson, do you want to add to that, comment on that? Because I know why you're here to talk about it, but I want this to kind of be a both and, because Dr. Wall laid that beautifully when she said personal power parallels with political power.
Absolutely.
Right? So please.
Yeah, I'll dive in. I'm gonna dive into where you left off, Dr. Wall. From a community organizing perspective, right? We have these things that we call organizing principles, right? And they're not sort of tiered order, but for our organization, the way we have it listed out, the first one that we have is the first revolution is internal. And that speaks to exactly what you were saying, Dr. Wall, this idea that before we can actually begin to go and try to make change in the world, right, there's change that has to happen inside of us. I'm reminded of, as we just come off of the heels of Dr. King's birthday celebration and things of that nature, in his letter from a Birmingham jail, he articulates, right, that before they go out to do the nonviolent protest, that there's this process of purification, right, that organizers and leaders would go through. And that was so that they could actually go and be able to withstand, right? In the Bible, we would call it the wiles of the devil, right, and of the enemy. But he was clear to articulate it's the ability to withstand the violence, right, that is going to happen to their bodies in that moment. And I think, sometimes we highlight these moments and assume that this isn't what we're walking in every day. Every day our children are going to school, they're attempting to withstand the violence, right, of an education system that hates them. Every time, black women go to the doctor or to the hospital, you're attempting to withstand the violence, right, that is happening on your bodies. And that takes a process of internal revolution and purification of the self to be able to do that, doing all the things that Dr. Wall talked about, being able to understand the triggers and all those sorts of things that happen to us. And so, again, just to kind of lean into that from the organizing perspective, before we can even go out to make this change in the world, let me even not say before, let me say as, right, we're going out to make this change in the world, there's this consistent process of internal revolution that has to continue to happen in order for us to be effective in God's hands and feet, right, in our communities.
Right,
I love the way you conceptualize that. I love that, because we are the people who know trauma.
Yes, ma'am.
We know trauma. Trauma has been used to control us, to exploit us, to make money off of us. We know what trauma is like. And some of us have experienced trauma across generations. And we are this generation, the here and now. In Fannie Lou's classroom, we get to stop it right here. We get to look at that internal experience that allows us to bring all of that past pain to a place of power.
Come on. How do we turn that? How do we understand? I love that pain into power, right? How do we understand these traumatic moments, right? As what they are, trauma, right? So we ain't going to erase it, right? We're not going to wish it away. It happened to us. And yet and still, like the baby turtle, right, who was born on the bank of the ocean, right, has to drag and claw its way to the ocean, right? But it's building up that muscle so that turtle will be able to swim. How then do we see that as well and use it to really do the thing called achieving human purpose, right? And this is how King defines power, as the ability to achieve human purpose.
Yes.
I think part of what happened is that we have looked at trauma as if there is something wrong with us.
Right.
So when it has happened, we have been taught that we should be ashamed. You should be ashamed of yourself. That we have taught to bear shame. We have been taught to accept the judgment of others. So the first thing we get to do is to say, wait a minute, this is going to be a strengthening moment for us. It's all right for us to say, that's not okay what happened. That's right. Not okay what happened in school. And that teacher made me go to the back of the classroom and told me how I wasn't going to be good enough to do anything but vocational work. They do that to our children every day. And I know you think you got your kid in that private school and everything is going to be great.
Come on.
It's trauma in that private school, everybody. It's trauma in the places. So we have to be willing to step in those places with our children to see what they're up against so that we can help them negotiate it. And we certainly have to be able to look at our own personal histories so that we can accept the fact that what happened to us doesn't define us. How we respond to that and how we transform that experience is what allows us to say, it ain't just me. They're doing this to all our kids, all of us. And then we start to organize and mobilize.
Yes, ma'am. We got to do. We have to do all of that. So I want to talk about. So that's why I know this is also something I know you could speak to very well. I was thinking about what I just read prior to coming up to the church today, and it was, they were talking about the governor of Florida who banned all of the AP African American Studies classes, right, in the state of Florida. And so back to what you were saying, I think a bit earlier about us knowing where we came from, right? So I think part of when they say the first revolution is in your mind, part of it is also understanding who you really are and really what we come from. So talk to us about the way in which how white supremacy is working in this moment when you're banning an AP African American Studies class in an entire state, why that happens. Because, you do have some people, black folks and others who feel like, well, one, they call it all critical race theory. They have lumped it all together, which we know is not correct. But many of them will say, I've heard parents say, I don't want my children to learn about that history in school, in class, because it makes them feel inferior because they think they were just slaves. Right?
They go straight to the slave.
Right. Yes.
To the slave narrative.
So can we?
But the reason so Reverend Robinson, I don't need to be doing all the talking. Let me just say this real quick.
Oh, man,
that part of why our children are embarrassed when they do Black history, part of it is because it comes through a foreign prism.
That's right.
Because when we talk about what we've been through, when they talk about what they're going through, it allows them to connect with the original purpose that Carter G. Woodson had when he had Negro History Week.
Right.
And I'm old enough to have been a child of Negro History Week. He said, you need to know your history because if you do, you're going to change your future. And I think that when we have the history that comes through our lens, which you see in African American studies, when you see that, they gotta close that down because you're going to have too many people like us who are thinking for ourselves and challenging the system.
And so Reverend Roberts, from an organizer standpoint, what do we do to counter these moves that are happening? Not just in Florida, Texas, South Carolina. I mean, it's across the country.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the political interventions, right, that can be made, right? And that is, the policy interventions, the organizing the people. But the truth is, before we can even get to making those political interventions, I wouldn't even say before, right? As we're doing, I'm trying to really work on my process language, so ride with me. But I think as we're doing that, the truth is, everything Dr. Wall said, I'm really just going to lean into what you just said, Doc. The reality is if you do not know your history, you cannot have faith. But if you know your history, you can then have faith. So no history, no faith, and no history, no faith. I say that to say the reality, right? The Bible says faith is the substance of what I hope for and the evidence of what I cannot see. And if power is the ability to achieve human purpose, that means that my power is my ability to achieve this thing, right, that I've purposed in my life. But if I don't know my history, then I can't have any faith. I can't hope for anything, right? And so the literal closing off, taking away, shutting out the reality and the real history of what we as Black Americans, right, actually have gone through, struggled through, and overcome, and created in the process of that, quite literally strips us of the ability to have faith, because it strips us of the ability to have the knowledge of what we can hope for. And so I say that to say, this is why teaching history as accurately and consistently as possible is imperative. It quite literally forms what we have faith in. So I say all that to say, I totally agree with what you said, Dr. Wall. We need to, interventions that need to happen. We need to have our own political education, right? We need to begin to develop our own political education in our congregations. Our people are coming to meet every Sunday, every Wednesday. How are we using this space to form and inform, right, our faith, right, in our history and in what we actually can go out and do? And then how are we using our organizational spaces, right, to create this consistent political education that is able to stand in the gap, right, for what's missing in our education spaces, in our in our government-sanctioned public education spaces, right? How do we create this to fill in the gap, and then use that education and use that power to then go and make the innovations on the policy side, so we know exactly what we're fighting for, and we know exactly what we need to do to actually get those wins. So that's sort of how I see the problem and where I see the solutions.
Yeah, so I like what you're saying too, just in terms of, so if they're not learning in school, we have other places and alternatives for them to learn, right? So that's why I'm not trying to date you, but you said you remember when
I remember. And I need to talk about it because people are so afraid to be who they are. Oh, I lived in the segregated South.
Yeah.
Oh, I used to be colored. So all of those things that I used to be called the N-word. We can't even say it now. I got called it. So, yeah, I lived through that, and I need to be able to say that to people so that they can see how you do overcome and what it looks like to come out of that era.
Yes, and
But
so
anyway, go ahead. What was your question?
What it goes to what you're saying too, right? But also in your era, in your day, going to school, you learned about your history, right? That was just part of the curriculum. You learned that, and you can tell me, but I'm assuming you learned that from your Black teachers. You learned that in your congregational spaces. You probably learned that at home. I imagine your parents poured that into you, into the home. So it was almost as if, because I'm thinking about my grandmother right now. I know how she learned a lot of that, right? It came out of where she went to school. It came out of her parents. It came out of the community where she lived, where she got a lot of her education, both formally and informally, but she was very clear and rooted in who she was as a Black woman in the Deep South in Alabama. And so I'm also wondering, I was reading this book called Fugitive Pedagogy, and the author is really kind of using Carter G. Woodson's text, but he talks about the ways in which a lot of Black teachers, when they had to have the curriculum from the school that did not match what they wanted to teach, how they would have the Black history book or the book talking about Black history in their lap. And they would still teach the children, right, the real history. But when like if a superintendent or someone walked in to make sure to see what they were teaching, they knew how to, conveniently hide the book and then look at the curriculum that they, quote unquote, should have been teaching based on the school district. So I'm also wondering, even as things are being snatched out of classrooms, how do some of our educators still, right, in a way, still are able to put this material forth in school? Because we can do it at our congregation on Sunday and a Wednesday. We could do it, on on a Saturday, have Saturday school or something of that nature. But the reality is our children are in school quite a bit, right? A lot of what they're hearing and learning will be in the school setting. So I'm wondering, so this could be for Edwin or Dr. Wall, like what are in reality, like what would be step one we need to do as we see this assault? I heard you saying, Edwin, because the as we do is my whole thing. I'm a both and person. Like you have to do both and. So I'm just wondering, like if we want to say, in 6 months from now, here's what we're going to do to really be able to counter this sweeping policies around the country to take real education in Black history and Black studies, African American studies out of the classroom. Like, what would we say? This is what we're going to put together and really do, like practical that people can do.
Yeah, Dr. Wall, if you don't. Please go ahead.
I think it. So yeah, I certainly had Black teachers who gave excellence. You talked about the theme of excellence. Mm-hmm. They were about excellence, and they were about pouring into children so that when the doors of desegregation, the doors of segregation were dismantled, that they would have children ready to go through. And we were ready to go through. Mm-hmm. We paid dues and we continued to pay dues. So how did they do it? They knew the value of knowledge, and they were willing to put themselves in situations where they not only gave information, but they gave purpose. This information, everybody, isn't to make you rich. I came out of also that era where so many people did go through those wonderful doors, and they went to do well, and they stayed to do well for themselves. Mm-hmm. So part of what we have to realize is that the co-opting of leadership, so that once you do get into a place of power, that you become so entranced with the stuff of power that you fail to do the work that King did, and you fail to do the work that Malcolm X did, and you fail to do the work that Dr. Frederick Haynes is doing, Jeremiah Wright, Dr. Wright. So what you do is, the 1619 Project is coming out on TV. People went crazy when Nicole Hannah-Jones came out with that. Why? We need to know why, and we need to share that with our children. Mm-hmm. A lot of our kids, our families, they don't know a lot about Martin Luther King Jr. So when they have that holiday, that also is a day that it's a holiday off and not a day on. The work that we must do, I think, starts in family. And if you don't have a family where that's happening, then you look at the institutions. Friendship West is such an institution where justice is taught, where children can be educated. Reverend Robinson, what do you think?
Yes, to everything you said. And to even add into that, right, I think that our educators, you really laid it out very well. Simply having Black faces in institutional places does not assume that they actually have the information or the courage to do what you laid out there, Reverend Ayers, right? To actually be subversive, right? In the slave master's house, right? And so how are we even creating political education for our Black educators, right? To give them the tools, right? I was just hit with a book from a gentleman. They've been working on this. It's called Black History 365 Education. So you can look that up online, Black History 365 Education.com. And they've created a Black history textbook. Right. And so it is fundamental. Like, this is a textbook. This isn't, just some, book of someone's musings. Right. But it can literally be used as a history textbook in the classroom. Right. So the educator may not be given the curriculum from the state board or whatever, but they can use then this textbook to circumvent, right, and to fill in holes and to fill in gaps. And we're going to need to give our educators these tools and give them the place where we can even educate them outside of their ISDs, outside of their systems, right, so that they can then go back in and be subversive inside the room. Last thing I'll say is, I was just at a school in DeSoto. Oh, the name escapes me, but it's the new technology magnet school that they have in DeSoto ISD. And again, Black woman principal, right? Want to shout that out. But she invited us in to do some King teaching work. And the students were watching what is known as King's I Have a Dream speech, right? But we helped to educate them, right? That the King's title of that was Normalcy No More. So we asked it was about 40 or 50 students from about 5th grade to 8th grade, I think 6th grade to 8th grade, and asked the question, everything that you just heard in that I Have a Dream or Normalcy No More speech, how much of that stuff do you think is still normal today, right? So that's 1963. This is 2023. And about 85% of those 40 to 50 students raised their hand and said, I think everything that he's talking about is still normal today. So if our 6th grade to 8th graders can listen to that message, see the world as it is and say, I think things are still the same, that lets us know that there is still political education that we need to do in our institutional spaces, and we need to help our educators to have the tools to be able to be subversive in the classroom.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for that. Dr. Wall, did you want to respond?
Oh, I definitely agree with that. I think that is so important. I think tools are necessary. I think it is important for our children to say, yeah, it's still the same. Everybody's still the same. And then we have to come back with, it's not the same as it was when I was a child. That you need to know that in my lifetime, I have seen things change. I have seen, I was at Doug Wilder's inauguration and was very excited. And, that was amazing to me. I got a Westmore T-shirt, so that's something that I love to wear. Got a Stacey Abrams T-shirt, too. But I think that it is important for us to look at, we have made a difference. It is different today. Right. And we have to encourage them with a little bit of joy, a little bit of humor, because we want them to be motivated. Because in your lifetime, you're going to see even greater changes. And that gets us back into our faith model. You can do even greater than this.
I'm glad you said it, because I want to switch to, we talk about the trauma and the issues, but I also like to talk about the joy that we also have to make sure we have in this moment, right? Because there are things that we can celebrate. Because I think that's also what we need to. Because I think I can be guilty of this sometimes. I'm so busy. This is what's wrong. We got to. I'm like, oh, but guess what?
Yep.
We also have joy. Black folks have done some amazing things. We celebrate that too. Let's lean into that. Because we still have to tend to all this, because if we don't, we're not going to make it, right? I think we have so much that we're trying to claw our way out of that we have to always address that. But it is being more intentional, for me at least, being more intentional about downtime. Let's just enjoy one another's company. Let's just be, right, and find a safe space to do that. But I want to back up and ask this question of the two of you. And so I'm glad you shared about the young people, because that encourages me. Because I'm going to tell you something I ran across over King Holiday weekend on a couple of social media platforms, right? Of people who were, they were going back and forth. These are, I don't know ages, right? But I can assume they're younger because of the platform I was looking at, right? They were going back and forth on King's birthday. Right? They were like, no, it's the 16th. No, it's the 15th. No, it's not. Y'all dumb. It's the 16th. And then somebody finally said, well, what does it even matter when he was born? Right? And I'm just like, okay. So I said, let me keep scrolling. Then I'll scroll and see a couple of comments to say, why are we so concerned about a dead man anyway? Right? So then I said, let me get off of this platform. Then I got to another one, and they're showing all these, and this has become popular in the past years, which baffles my mind, of party flyers of King on it, either in with gold teeth, a do-rag. One said, I had a dream big booty party. So I want to also ask the question, how do we, and this may not be the right language, you all can help me with this, how do we create the appetite for younger folks or other folks to want to understand how you're saying that? And then some folks are saying, well, that stuff happened back then. But you have 6th to 8th graders saying, no, that stuff is happening now. So I'm just wondering, how do we create this this appetite or this desire to say that man's life still matters and this is why? Right? And we ought to get his birthday right, because just like your birthday, it does matter. He was born on the 15th, not the 16th, So And this is me just kind of.
I think.
Go ahead, Dr. Wall.
I think
Yes.
we need to recognize, Reverend D.A. I think we need to recognize that our children who are traumatized have to figure out how to cope, and if they don't have any avenues that will allow them to cope more positively, we see the things that we find very disturbing. Now, I was around some youth who. Here in Atlanta, who said, yeah, it was a day off for me. I had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go to the King Center and help clean it up. Somebody else said, yeah, I helped do sandwiches because we gave out sandwiches to people who were in need. That you have to meet our children where they are. And if our children have not been nurtured and taught, we're going to see their frustration. I'm going to see you dead anyway. What difference does it make? Unless they can see that, oh, well, he made a difference. I would not be here were it not for Dr. King's work. That's just a black fact. I would not be Dr. Wall. That's a black fact. If they can see that, really? Yeah, I used to be colored. You were colored. That they need to see something that they can relate to. And you know what? I heard what they called you behind your back. Giving them a way to have a little humor, to have a little joy, to have a little strength, and to have a little something positive beyond the wonderful outlets of rap. I love rap. Everybody wants to rap. I love sports. Everybody wants the basketball out, the football out. But we got to teach them the genius and the gift that they have in so many other areas. And that's where I think we would be able to look at what we haven't done. It's a measure of us.
Yes.
And what we get to do, because they are great.
Right.
We make an impact on them. We make an impact on our own kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll add in, I think, I'm trying to figure out how to say this succinctly. I was having a conversation with somebody just talking about, how actually Reverend Dr. Donna Battle, that's who I was talking to. And just how black people in the black church and black faith and our black struggle, unlike our Jewish sisters and brothers or our Muslim sisters and brothers or our Asian sisters and brothers, how our things in this country are always up to be commodified. You're not going to see, Rabbi Heschel, you know what I mean, with a gold tooth in his mouth in the South, right? But that has, and I think that has less to do with what black people have done to our figures and have more to do with the fact that black people's stuff in this country is always up to be commodified, and our people, right? You'll hear Dr. Haynes and Dr. Jeremiah Wright and so many others have said this over the years, right? That we've ripped the teeth out of King and out of our movement because we've turned them into a product. And we turn their body and their legacy into a product instead of realizing that the product of instead of actually focusing on the product of their movement, right? The product is liberation. So if we want to put something in gold teeth, put liberation on gold teeth, right? We want to put a do-rag on something, put a do-rag on liberation, right? Not on the figure. And I mean that to say, I'm all for baptizing liberation in the current moment. Let's baptize it in your culture. Baptize it in what's happening in your community, right? If that's what it looks like, baptize it in that. But let's not do it in such a way that we end up commodifying people and legacy and history.
I like what you're saying. What you're saying. Because if your daddy has a gold tooth, and he's about the business of making a difference in the lives of our children, bring on the gold teeth. If your daddy if you got a do-rag and you're about the business of knowing who you are and why you're wearing it and what it means, and you've got the love of God, if you understand your relationship with Christ, you can be the one that stands up and say, I did not do that. I'm not commodifying us. That's happening to us. We got to separate what is happening to us and the abuse that is coming from outside that causes us to look at ourselves as if there's something wrong. Hey, you have all the gold teeth you want if you are about the work of freedom.
Period.
Come on.
And I don't think we have to be ashamed of where we are, how we talk, how we look, what we wear. We need all of us, and we need to have people who can infiltrate at all levels. And we need to respect the mamas that, she's so fast. She is a woman who has great strength, and we have to look at ourselves through a positive lens in order to recapture our whole community. I don't want an elitist community.
That's right.
I don't want a talented 10th community. I want a community They call it the beloved community, I do believe.
I think that's
I
what
do
they
believe
say,
that's
Doc.
what, and this is why I have y'all on the show, because I love how you succinctly said that, because I think that's what I wanted to come out of this conversation when I brought the piece about King, is that don't put him in that space.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? And what Dr. Wall is saying, same way we see a black Jesus. Well, first it's just correct, period, historically. But it's this notion of like, I need to be able to see myself in the movement. And that's why I'm always about everybody has a position. Fannie Lou Hamer wasn't educated.
That's right. That's right.
In the school sense.
That's right.
Right? But she was she had a well-developed theology. I would say she was a practical theologian.
Yes.
Hands down. Right? And so
And
I
she
think
was willing to do the work.
exactly.
She was the one who was willing to do the
willing
work.
to, and she didn't. And again, she could have said, "Well, I came from X, Y," but she also talks about her mother and how her parents poured into her that she was a beautiful black child.
That's right.
She said, "I never had a white dog growing up."
That's right.
You see, so I think I like how you said that. Like, just don't commodify the people, right? But and to Dr. Wall's point, yeah, we need everybody, and everybody needs to be able to connect at their level in various levels. So I like how you all brought that succinctly together. It takes all of us if we're going to do this thing right. And I think we have to be able to see ourselves and be able to show up, right, in our authentic self, because that's what you want. So I think that's so important. Thank you for that.
Could I lean into
Yeah,
one more quick point?
yeah, absolutely.
I was just thinking about that, and to take it even a step further, I think when we begin to commodify the people, then we actually put our people in danger. Because when we commodify a person, we lift them up, even though King's last name is King, we lift them up to the place of king. And when we do that, we set people up to be murdered, assassinated,
right.
tracked
Yes.
by the FBI, exiled, right? And this isn't hyperbole, right? This is the history.
Right.
Like, the very fact that Dr. Wall, that you are actually still here to tell us the story, right, is a feat. Right, in and of itself.
That's right.
Because that's what happened to our people. So when we do that to our people, we literally lift people up to be damaged and harmed by the system that wants to violate us. And so if we're going to, like I said, the product of our movement, the commodity, right? I want to make sure we really draw that line of this
Right.
word. The product of our movement is life-giving liberation, not human beings.
Amen.
That's right.
We
Right.
are the legacy of the movement, right? But the product is life-giving liberation. So again, let's commodify the heck out of that.
And you know why it's important to do that is because people die in
That's right.
transition.
That's right.
And so if we don't do what you're saying, then that's what makes people get stuck you don't move. And it's like Angela Davis says, freedom is a constant struggle,
Yes.
right? It's just we have to continue to take this thing a little further and further along the way and be connected, because some of what when they said it's still here today, those young people, it's still here. And to Dr. Wall's point, it's not the same, because then you have different iterations of it.
That's right.
Right? Marcel Alexander, New Jim Crow, right? It's just how do we do that? So I like how you said that. I think that's why it's so important to draw that clear line, because that what can happen. Oh, well, or like Dr. Haynes. I'm like, we need more pastors in DFW area like a Dr. Haynes. Don't just put him up there by himself.
That's
Because
right.
to your point, he becomes the target.
And
Right?
the commodity.
And the commodity, and then people and it makes people think they can own you.
That's right.
And control. So I just love how you're putting that together, because I think this still keeps us where Dr. Wall said from the very beginning. I love how she even framed the conversation further, was the personal power is parallel to the political power.
Yes.
Right, and it's a certain kind of personal power we make sure you're having before you slide into this political power, because we also don't want you to bring in a damaged personal power that you hold, because then you contaminate the political power that we need to really move forward in ways that are life-giving.
Yes.
And as you would say, not using power as death-dealing,
Yes.
right? Using it in the proper way. So I appreciate that. That was a really good exchange. I think that's one of the things I want us to see about what power really means, that we have it, but it's also whose hands is it in and how they use and leverage that power. So Dr. Wall, I'm going to let you get the last word on this piece, and then I'm going to let Reverend Robinson get his last word in. So what would you, from your vast background and your experience, say to people or anyone who's listening, yeah, Dr. Wall, I heard you. I heard I have to face the trauma. I have to call it out. I have to name it before I can really deal with it, and there's no shame in that. If I'm sitting here thinking, well, yeah, I want to work on that, what's the first thing I do? Do I kind of look for a therapist? Do I don't know, do I need to just write everything out? What would be the first thing you would tell someone to do?
I love therapists. I'm a counselor. I'm a psychologist. I love therapists. House of Minerva. Part of what we have to recognize is that we're not we have the right to be crazy. We have the right to be depressed. We have the right to be anxious and to heal from any kind of mental disorder.
Right.
We certainly have that right. But part of what we know is that if we have been traumatized and if something has happened to us, it doesn't necessarily require us to look at it in terms of a disease model. We need to have balance. And the way we
that's
get
good.
balance is to find those places where people can see us. Certainly, for instance, West is a place where Sawabona, we see you. But there are other places that you probably already know where people will see you and accept you and begin to do the work of healing, begin to do the work of moving forward. So I don't necessarily think that therapy is the solution in the way that we experience it, because that could be another place where we fall into being controlled. I think the solution is in terms of understanding who we are, where we are at this moment in time, and where are the people who are determined to move us forward. And they're all over the place,
Right.
where you would least likely expect them. Dr. Tamar Bryan is over the American Psychological Association. Who would imagine a woman of God who is African-centered, who is an activist, would be over an organization? They don't even know what they have. There are many of us all over the place. Find somebody, connect with them, and do your work.
Thank you. So as we talk about the both and model and wow, so while we're getting the help we need, however we may find that, while we take ownership of getting our healing that we need, what did you say we probably would need to do if I'm like, I'm going to work on that, but I also know I need to do something outside of just myself. It's that whole Howard Thurman that I want to live my outer life from my inward sanctuary. What do I do?
Wow, I mean, you brought up Howard Thurman, and so to lean into to our great mystic, he said, what the world needs is people who have come alive, and so he says, find what makes you come alive and go do that. The truth is, the trauma that we've experienced, the pain that we have experienced, that we do experience every day, is quite literally set up to deal death to us. It is to kill us. The Bible says what? The enemy comes to do three things: kill, steal, and destroy. And so if we listen to the great mystic Howard Thurman, and we listen to what Dr. Wall has laid out today, the work is find what makes you come alive and go do that. I don't care what it is, because what's going to make you come alive is going to make somebody else come alive.
That's right.
It's going to let your light shine bright. And again, because I'm a preacher, so it gets in me. The Bible says, let your light so shine before the people that they'll see the good work and then glorify the God, right, who has given us this light. And so that's what I'll just say. Listen to Howard, listen to the scripture, listen to Dr. Wall, and go find what makes you come alive and lean into that with reckless abandon. And I believe that that's what's going to help spark joy in our hearts as we kind of work through what has happened to us and work through what we have to deal with every day.
Right. And I like how you said that, right? Because I think once you find out what makes you come alive, I'm pretty sure probably 99% of the time it's going to be something that's going to impact, right, the issues that we're dealing with every day.
It's going to be life-giving liberation.
So it's going to, you'll be part of movement either way.
That's right.
So listen, we're going to close this segment of Fannie's Classroom because one of the things I like to close out on, we talked about joy, Black joy. So I always like to ask each of my guests, what is something that brings you joy? Dr. Wall, I probably know where you're going to go with yours. So I'd love to hear, what brings you joy? Like, what makes Dr. Wall happy and get excited beyond what you do?
She doesn't know where I'm going, everybody. I get so much joy from the people in my world. I am so blessed to have a wonderful son who does the kind of writing that we're talking about, who has wonderful sons who also do some writing and do some. I am blessed by the people that allow me to be with them in their points of pain, and I get to be with them when they come out on the other side. I am blessed by the people that God sends into my life, and I certainly am blessed by a Savior who gives me a word at a moment and allows me to have people smile at me when the work is taking place on a whole spiritual plane. Hallelujah.
Amen. And Ashe. Thank you, Dr. Wall. Reverend Robinson.
Look, I get joy when I think about what he's done. No, let me go see something. Well, I'm churchy, but I ain't that churchy, y'all. No, I get joy. Like Dr. Wall said, I'm very much the same. I draw my joy from people, watching people come alive, watching people literally lean into life-giving liberation and lean into not trying to earn their leisure, not trying to do something that just makes them feel good and oppresses others, but what makes them come alive in the world. That brings me so much joy. And then my family and my loved ones and being able to connect with them and see their beautiful faces every day. You know, and my friends here in Dallas, my crew, they know who they are. They give me so much life.
Nice. So that's so good to hear. Thank you all for sharing that so people can hear more about, you. Because sometimes we get so defined by our roles in the world that people just need to know that we are human. We have things we love to do and what brings us joy in the world. And so listen, that's why hang out with us. Don't hang up quite yet. But listen, we thank you for tuning in to our first episode of season 2 of Fannie Lou's Classroom. I just want to remind you, make sure you go to friendshipwest.org/justice and purchase a Fannie Lou's Classroom t-shirt. This helps us to continue to do what we're trying to do by way of really talking about the way that faith, theology, and politics intersects. And we can have wonderful guests, amazing guests like Dr. Brenda Wall. She's really Reverend Dr. Brenda Wall and Reverend Edwin Robinson to be with us. So thank you so much. Make sure you tune in next week, 12 o'clock noon. We're here every Thursday, 12 o'clock noon. Like us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell to make sure you're able to be alerted when we go live. Thank you so much. Have an amazing rest of your Thursday.
From the church house.